This week wraps up our two-part series on the 4 horsemen of the retirement apocalypse. We're going to introduce that 4th horseman, but more importantly, we're going to discuss some prudent planning and mindsets to overcome them. So last week we talked about the first 3 horsemen of the retirement apocalypse: sequence of return risk caused by volatility, the erosive impact of inflation, and then of course the need for our money to last longer as life expectations, longevity continues to increase. The 4th horseman that we'll touch on before we get to some of the solutions and mindsets we need to embrace is bad planning, in particular simplified planning, if planning is existing at all. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about following blindly off-the-shelf models with little understanding of what's in them, following approaches that only use 2 asset classes, of course, most commonly US stocks and bonds, and not appropriately diversifying clients, as we'll touch on here in a little bit. Or it could be following old adages like you should have the same percentage of bonds in your portfolio as years you are old. As much as we might laugh or scoff at some of these things, we see them all the time while bringing on prospective clients. And it's exactly this kind of approach, blind approach, following blindly a 4% rule, that again amplifies those first 3 horsemen and really brings into a question the ability to, again, maintain sufficient funds through your whole life cycle. Couple practical examples. If we look at thinking back, if you haven't watched it, go back, watch video 1 around sequence of returns risk and then simplified planning. If you had retired post-COVID, as so many did, obviously not only just a lot of boomers retiring, but that was a catalyst for a lot of people to decide this was a time to be done with my career. You would have stepped off that track, gone into one of these models, say a 50-50 model of US stocks and bonds, right into 2022, when we experienced not only a very nasty bear market in stocks, but almost a 20% drawdown within investment grade bonds as well. While we could look at a 5-year return of the AG, kind of a broad common ETF for investment grade bonds, and it's 1.65% return, and recognize that that's not going to sustain a 4 or 5% withdrawal rate, that's also just a theoretical return. It doesn't take into account the practical reality highlighted by sequence of returns risk of when you were having to sell off some of those shares to get that 4 to 5% distribution rate with a portfolio that was only generating 2% type cash flow. You were liquidating shares that never had a chance to rebound after that bear market. That again highlights exactly how easy it is to step into sequence of returns risk with just some timing that you can't help with respect to when you decide to be done, coupled with some overly simplistic planning. The second, and Matt will put up a nice chart here, again, is just the lack of clarity that comes from this kind of planning and this type of simplified allocations. If you look at this chart, it shows wildly different ranges, again, putting aside sequence of returns risk, that a 4, 5, or 6% distribution rate might help your money to last into your retirement. So if we look at these threats, which can appear very ominous, and they are, it might be easy to assume, well, there's nothing that can be done. So much of this is outside of our control. That's very true. And at the same time, some very simple steps, a very important mindset can help us overcome that. What is this mindset? What is the mantra that we should be repeating to ourselves? Maintain our ownership. It's something we talk about at 10 Capital all the time. What am I talking about? I'm talking about creating a plan that largely centers around creating sufficient cash flow that you're not having to liquidate shares with hopes that they're perpetually going up in value to maintain your lifestyle. If we've got that cash flow, if we map that cash flow to your needs, then we're not having to sell anything off, thus maintaining our ownership. Quick drawing. What am I talking about? Well, at some point you retire and you take this basket of money and you go and you buy investments that you hope are going to provide for you and your family in retirement. It's at that point, with whatever amount of money you have, that you're able to buy a certain amount of shares of whatever. So we'll just say it's 100 shares. And those shares, if you're doing it correctly, should have a really nice cash flow associated with them. Again, maybe a number, but let's say we design it so that you're able to make $100,000 a year off dividends. Of course we care what it's worth, but this is one of those things that's going to be outside of anybody's control. The good news is, after day one, when we take that basket of money, if we can maintain those shares, we're likely to maintain that income year over year over year, regardless of what the market may be doing. The common question we get is, well, yeah, but don't dividends go down when the markets go down? And the short answer to that is no. Dividends are connected to how many shares you own. There is a dividend per share. What about dividend cuts? They certainly can happen, but if you look at, again, if you're taking a basket of equities and what has occurred over history and really understand the mindset of companies, that cutting a dividend is one of the very last things that they hope to do. And even taking into account an 08 type situation with what went on with banks and TARPs and cutting of dividends, far from getting cut, dividends grow considerably over time. So let's bring this together around those horsemen. Sequence of returns risk. How do we negate this? We negate it by doing just what I said, getting those shares that produce some amount of money that maps to our lifestyle such that we're never having to be liquidators of what we have within our portfolios. So what about the second horseman, inflation? We've got these dividends, but costs of things are going up. We've got our 100 grand. Is that going to help maintain over this whole 35 years? Well, the good news is dividends are something that over time historically grow, and not just grow, but grow well above the rate of inflation. If you look at this chart, every decade since World War II, you'll see that dividend growth has surpassed inflation growth, with one exception, the 1970s, and it wasn't all that disparate. If you look here recently, post-2000, there's been a renewed emphasis on dividends and dividend growth. This is one of the core asset classes, obviously, that'll help buoy you up. Another one, core real estate, which we love to access through institutional, professionally managed solutions. If you look at rent growth since 1980, it's averaged right around 3.91%. If you look at inflation, the approximate average over that same time frame has been sub 3%. So again, two big core catalysts within people's portfolios that'll not only help them maintain their cash flow, but grow their cash flow to fight inflation. Correspondingly then, of course, last much, much longer, negating our third horseman, longevity. And of course, all this is representative of not embracing that fourth horseman, which is bad planning. If you're wanting to go even deeper, there's more materials and charts in this week's written commentary. If you're not subscribed, you can go to 10capital.com. It's free. Investing is dangerous. It can feel like a very scary roller coaster. With the right plan providing the tracks, that income providing the guardrails, it can at least be a smoother, safer ride. Thanks so much.